My name is Wolf von Laer and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Students for Liberty. I just got the job 6 or 7 months ago in August last year, 2016. And it has been a wild ride, but I truly enjoy serving this organization in this capacity because I know how much we are changing individuals' lives here in the United States, but all around the world. Because what we do is we're focusing on libertarian, classical liberal students, really identify them and then give them the resources to become better advocates, which means they can organize their own events, they can run campus groups, and we see all around the world there's a hunger for the ideas of liberty. And it's really, really great to see what kind of activities comes out of our youth all around the world. I studied in Erfurt, Germany, you can tell by the accent, I guess. And I studied social science and economics, and at some point the financial crisis happened in 2008. And you might remember this, but there was like this narrative in the media that it was all about like the greed of the bankers or the fault of capitalism, which is a very simplistic explanation. So it didn't make sense to me, so I started Googling and I found out about the ideas of this guy, Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich Hayek and others. I learned about the Austrian business cycle theory and I got hooked because this explained so much more what was going on in the economy and the world around us. And I started reading more and more and really enjoyed that. And yeah, then I quickly became like a libertarian and read more about this. And so my passion drove me then to study Austrian economics in Madrid, Spain. And after that, I went on to work on my PhD at King's College London under Mark Pennington. So this is like more public choice work. And next month, I will defend that thing, and hopefully I can then completely concentrate on Students for Liberty because I still have to work on my PhD. The history of Students for Liberty is that we became incorporated in 2008. It was just like a bunch of students. Alexander McCoben, Sloan Frost, Sam Ekman, people who are now still on our board, came together and we're thinking about, okay, how can we organize things on campus better? Because there were not many resources in 2008 there. And they came up with a plan to organize a conference to see like how much interest was actually there. So they did organize it in 2007 at Columbia University in New York. And it was the worst possible circumstances. There was a blizzard going on and people were asking them, is the conference cancelled? And so they were calling people up. And so they were on the phone constantly, but they managed to do it. So even though the circumstances were bad, they had 100 people there. And they realized at that point, we need an organization to facilitate that. 2008, it was incorporated. And from then, the whole student movement around the world was built. Now, 2017, we have a budget of $3.9 million US. We are on all inhabited continents. We have thousands of student leaders, and last year alone, we organized 98 conferences with over close to 20,000 attendees, talking about philosophy, economics, why we need free speech, why we need free markets, and these sorts of things. And volunteers are always involved, and they're learning a lot of valuable skills as I did as a volunteer, and that's great. Why anyone should attend a conference is that the ideas of liberty are just very interesting. The ideas move the world, and young people are at the forefront of that. So it doesn't matter really how old you are, as long as you still believe that you're learning, you're a student. So even if you're an older generation, I think it is very interesting to go to such an event, to see what students are talking about, to see what the issues are, and to learn more about the ideas. That would be one thing. And also to see really the motivation of the crowd and become more excited. We just had our main conference last weekend. We had around 1,500 people there. And if we had our supporters and investors and the media and older people who were there, they just loved it because the ideas were interesting. We talked about foreign policy, privacy, free markets, all of these things. They were interesting, and they loved to see that young students were so interested in that and very well spoken and educated on that. So I would say it's something for everyone. I think there are many good reasons why someone should invest in Students for Liberty. One has to ask the question, how do you see change in society? Many people focus on politics, which is fair. However, many of the more conservative or libertarian revolutions with Thatcher and Reagan, as successful as you might interpret them, very often later than somebody from the left or from the hardcore right is coming in and is reforming everything back to before. So we need libertarians in all parts of society. We need them in media, we need them in academia, we need them as business people. And students are going to be the future. And we are the only organization who is really building leaders. by empowering them to do great things. Just a couple of weeks ago, one of our leaders was defending Uber on national television division and also quoting Frédéric Bastiat, who is a great French thinker. These are individuals who are 20 years old, and I could give you more and more examples. And we are building up these people. Most parents tell their kids what to do. Universities tell their kids what to do. We take them and we build them up. And this is the story that's my story. And I feel so much more competent and comfortable in this role that I have now with a lot of responsibility, again, like $3.9 million, 41 staff members, because Students for Liberty trusted me to do great things as a student. So if you are someone who gives to liberty causes, I think they should seriously look at us, look at what we have done. We have had huge impact, not only in the United States, but also in places like Brazil. There were this protest going on with 10,000 of students on the forefront of that. Young people were leading that. And many of the students behind it were our folks. And they had messaging, less Marx, more Mises, and wonderful things like that. And so we actually get stuff done. We can do things cheaper because of our worldwide network. For instance, our IT department is in Paraguay, Czech Republic, etc. And we have a track record of results. So if somebody cares about the ideas of liberty and how we can change society, they should invest in us. Yes, we have extensive experience actually. So we had a couple of meetings actually in this very room where all our sales phones had to be outside because we were very worried that some regimes were tracking our students. Some of our leaders have not been back into their home country, specifically Venezuela, because we know that they are being looked for by the government because they were active in Students for Liberty. We are very conscientious about this and we try to be very careful. However, if a student comes to us, it was in the case with the Venezuelan leader, and says, I'm going to do this with or without you, I rather have them do something with us so that we can give them a support network. We have access to lawyers. We have a worldwide network of organizations that could help people if they actually get in trouble. But it always happens, not only there, but also in places like Africa. You cannot even talk openly about like capitalism and free markets in some countries because it depends on country. It's a huge continent, of course. But you really have to use different words and you have to talk about entrepreneurship and so forth. So what we also rely on is on the expertise of the students. They know best what the circumstances are, what the issues are, what the codes are, how people have to talk to other folks in order to spread the ideas of liberty. And we try to help them as much as possible and try to make them aware of the risks sometimes, because sometimes they're naive about this. But yeah, we're really trying, and it doesn't always work. Just recently, one of our leaders, another one in Venezuela, an alumni now, Yon Goniccochea, was unjustified imprisoned. Even the own Venezuelan courts struck it down, but the executive still hold it up. And so he's in prison right now. We raised a campaign on this and gathered over 37,000 of signatures, and we tried to talk to other people to try to get him, but it's one of the worst possible countries. But we still have over 50 leaders there, and we need help to support them so that they are not being in danger. But the more we grow and the better we work together, the better is the network, and so and the more protected our students are. Yes, indeed. So Trump is interesting because we were founded in 2008, so we only experienced President Obama and a Democratic president. And of course, politics affects us and how our students think. So during Inauguration Week, we had an event here, and the messaging was pretty clear. Independent of who is in power, we will stand up for the ideas of liberty. And if Trump is doing something that gets rid of regulation or allows for more free markets or is good on free speech, we will say that that is the case. On free speech, it's very unlikely, actually. But if he's doing something bad, like banning entire people because they're coming from the wrong countries and stuff, then we have to talk about that. Sure, we have to make the case that the United States remains a safe country and that we have to look at people who are coming in. That's all good and well, but we have to also see how we are doing these sort of things. And executive overreach was a problem with Obama, and the right was really much against that and saying, look at all these executive orders, they're really bad. And now it's the other way around. And we libertarians always said, like, executive overreach is bad, full stop. We need checks and balances in the system, and we cannot have somebody who just thinks he or she knows best what's for society, just implement rules from one day to the other. We need processes for that. And so that was the messaging. To answer your question about the travel ban specifically, so one of our speakers, Amir Nasser, a dear friend of mine, was not allowed to come to the United States. He's a Sudanese blogger. He had to flee his country and find asylum in Canada. Why did he have to do that? It's quite ironic, because he wrote a book about how radical Islam is very, very dangerous, and there's a peaceful version of Islam. And he described how he got brought up in like a very problematic environment, and how radical Islam basically brainwashed him, and how he came out of it with critical thinking, questioning this, and he became a quite classical liberal and very moderate person who is a Muslim. And he is fighting for that, and his message is very well needed in these times, right? And his book was even banned in like parts of the world. And it's very unfortunate that a person like him, who stands up for American values, his father was here, I think he went to university, and he feels very close, connected to the constitutions and American values in general. And it's very sad that people like that are then also banned. And he couldn't make it to our conference, and we had to make him Skype in. So that was a little bit ironic. I don't have much interaction with them so far. I know there's like a fairly recent group, and they're trying to get out the message that Islam and thinkers who believe in the Prophet Muhammad are actually peaceful human beings, and they point to specific things in the Quran and trying to make that case. I've not seen too much of them, but I mean, we now also have Christians for Liberty, so why should there not be Muslims for Liberty? And we actually incubated Christians for Liberty, and they're trying to reach out to Christians more and try to make the case why they should become libertarian. And I think they have a similar message, albeit a much harder task to do right now in the present climate of ideas and fear of Islam, which we see in this country and many countries around the world. So we stand for basically three tenets, and we define it very broadly, because we want to concentrate on the 95% where libertarians agree and not on the 5% where we disagree, because divisiveness is really what we see right now in this country and around the world. So we want to bring people more together. But we're talking basically about that we need free economic institutions, free markets. About individual freedom, so people can choose how they want to live their life as long as they don't harm anyone else. And the third thing is a free academy, or academia, and free speech. These are the three tenets, and as long as people agree on, we do not necessarily say you have to read just Ayn Rand and believe in that, you just have to read Mises and believe in that. People have different motivations to come to this, maybe also more from the right angle, and people with very conservative values can also be very libertarian, and people with very social liberal values can also be libertarian, and we try to provide a forum, and that makes it interesting. Because then you suddenly have like a very evangelical Christian talking to an LGBT activist, and they can agree on almost all of the things, even though they have fundamentally different personal values. And that is beautiful, and that's how you form coalitions, and I think that is a message that more and more people like, which is quite different from the messaging that we hear at the moment from the alt-right or from also the radical left, where they always say that the other side is stupid and evil, and really try to divide people instead of bringing them together. I mean, in this country, we're focusing a lot on free speech. So we have free speech campaigns, we have free speech summits, we have specific students that we're training to become very good advocates on their campus, changing the free speech codes, because we also know that many campuses here in the United States are really, really bad on that. You were asking about that some of our students might be in danger from time to time. People not necessarily are in danger here, but sometimes when you hand out the Constitution on campus, people were facing like authority and saying, look, you cannot do that here, and they got into trouble and even fined because they invited like a speaker which was deemed controversial or something like that. And so we find pushback everywhere. So especially on free speech, we are really on that and trying to focus on that quite a lot. What will come up in the future? I mean, President Trump every other day he comes up with like a new policy proposal and frankly overreach. And so we will just be the vanguard of liberty and trying to protect our freedoms, whatever it might be. We also have to continue talking about civil liberties and privacy. Now Snowden is mostly out of the picture and nobody talks so much about the NSA, but fact is, we are being listened to right now, even though we are not even citizens of this country. And this is not really acceptable, this is not what the founding fathers envisioned, and we have to focus on these issues as well. But of course, economic freedom, we always have to focus on that and really increase the liberties in this country, because just recently The new Freedom of the World Index came out, and the United States continuously, year after year after year, went down in the polls. And this is the land of the free. This is the land which produced a lot of wealth, which not only made this country, but actually the whole world through trade rich. And now we're talking about protectionism. Now we're talking about closing all of the borders and not letting people like me in with like visas and stuff to produce value in this country. And that might be a road that is very, very dangerous if America wants to be in the forefront of like defending the ideas of liberty and staying a really rich and prosperous country. It's a very complicated question, right? So I think if you just look at the economic case, I think it's very clear that if you let people in and if they are able to be absorbed within society immediately, that you can quickly increase economic well-being. However, we also know that this is not so easy. Like Germans and Swedes let a lot of immigrants in. However, the labor market is nearly totally closed. So what happens? People come in, they want to make a better life for themselves. However, because of unions and social democratic policies, they cannot find like a job, like an entry-level job where they are not capable of speaking English or German that well and so forth. So what do? They get government handouts, but they're bored to death. And so of course that increases tension. Sweden even places immigrants in like places where there are no jobs whatsoever and already like poor neighborhoods, and of course you will have tensions. And it doesn't have to be that way, right? When Germany let in like literally 100,000 of Turks in the 50s and 60s, there were no regulations or like very few regulations. So people had to work. They were then suddenly working with a German next to them. They moved next to a German. They spoke the language, and it was quite peaceful. But if you don't allow the institutions to allow all these people to be soaked in and just have them on the welfare payment, that will lead to troubles. So you have to set the right conditions in order to make that case. And sometimes it doesn't work. And you can also not let in, like in a country of 8 million people, you cannot let in 20 million people from one day to the other. So you have to think about these things. But I think the economic case is very clear that I think this is the right way of going about it. And Europe has really benefited from open borders and being able to travel anywhere and studying anywhere, and really has brought the nations more together. And I think there's no reason to not do this in this country or in other countries either. Excellent question. So we are thinking about that right now, about the future of Students for Liberty and how we look like in 10 years. So in the last 10 years, we have grown a lot. And now we just trained this year, and we are not done with our fiscal year, over 2,300 people right now. So of course we want to just increase numbers. So I'm thinking about how does the organization look like if you have 10,000 or 20,000 people, and how do our programs work like in order to facilitate that. But that is less interesting. The more interesting question is, how do we continue to change the world and have libertarians really in influential positions? And I want to make this organization really the most impactful libertarian organization in the world. And I think we can only reach that goal when we continue to improve our programs and our training, and really having the most excellent training, so that let's say you're at university and you're saying like, oh, where should I go in order to improve my skills? That you not necessarily think about like kind of other training programs or going to like a week at Harvard or something. Say like, no, I want to go to Students for Liberty. I want to learn really the skills to organize events with hundreds of people, or that I know how to speak in front of the media. And I know that you have done that very well in training some of our folks in media training, and that has been really great. And so I really think that we can have a message and an impact in Brazil all around the world. So they were able to bring classical liberal messages to the forefront of the public discourse just via education. And I think that we could have that as well in this country and around the world. And once you have the right people with the right ideas and the right training in place during the right time, then we can have a huge impact. And we're seeing this more and more. So I'm coming from the academic side of things, so I'm influenced by many thinkers. Some of them I've already mentioned. So it's mostly like Mises, Hayek, and Ostrom. So I think my ideal of a free society would very much look quite radically decentralized, decision-making very much on the ground, so that you have like less power in DC, less power in Brussels, less power in Berlin or Paris or wherever, and more power on the ground. So one example would be Switzerland, where you know personally the local judge, where you are able to drink a beer with her and then ask questions about her latest decision. This sort of personal interaction is meaningful. Democracy means something. Democracy becomes fairly meaningless if you have 320 million people decide between two people. That's fairly meaningless, right? You don't have any stake in the matter. You don't really feel the results of your actions. In Switzerland, if you vote on something via direct voting, you know what much it costs. Like if you want to build this school, you will increase your value-added tax for 5 years about like 10%, and this will be the paycheck. And you can say yes or no to that. Cost and choice, that's what economics is about. We are very able to make decisions in the marketplace because we can see the price tag. And if we buy something and it doesn't perform, we can complain and we can get something back. Politics is nothing like that, right? We get like a huge bundle of promises, which we don't really see that they will be fulfilled. And we cannot complain if it happens, really. We can then maybe vote 4 years in a row from it, but what changes? Everyone is frustrated with that, and this is because the institutions are built on too much of a higher level. So I would like to see more power in the hand of the people, which means more free markets and more democracy from the bottom up. And thinkers like Elinor Ostrom also made very good case on why this can be more efficient. And her concept is called polycentricity, where you have like more public and private institutions, and she doesn't like the distinction, but let's put it that way, to compete with one another to produce public goods, so that you can maybe decide that if you want me as the person who picks up your trash, or maybe this person picks up your trash. And you can compare that, and you can see prices and efficiency, and if we don't satisfy your preferences, then we have to move on. And if we had more choices like that in the production of maybe education and other things which are traditionally in the hand of the government, then I think that would be a very, very good way. Will I see that in my lifetime? I don't think so, but I think it is theoretically correct. I think it's ethically correct. And I hope more and more countries will adapt that. And certainly the world has become a freer place, and we see very many positive results. And that's the reason I'm passionate fighting for these ideas. I mean, we see some countries where it really has stopped. And I would point to the danger of populism right now. The populism in this country and in France and everywhere. Because we see, for instance, in some Latin American countries where they had populism for so many years, people are not able to talk with one another anymore. They're still libertarians, they're still people who understand why we need free markets and property rights and the rule of law. They still understand that, but they cannot talk to one another anymore. And if this sort of civil discourse breaks down in a society, then it's very, very hard to get away from it. First, things have to go really, really, really bad until something happens. And not even then it's guaranteed, because every 5 or 10 years, Brazil goes through like Venezuela or some other countries goes through a major turmoil. The currency breaks down and everybody's protesting, and then like the opposition, which is a fake opposition, says, oh, we will change everything. And then nothing happens again. And then we're in the same position. If people cannot talk to one another and just yelling at one another, and we see this more and more now, that is really, really bad. So I think it is possible to stop it, but in the long run, we always have seen that the world has become freer, even though not always the same in the countries equally. So I'm hopeful and I'm very optimistic because I see what our leaders accomplish. Young people are changing the world right now, and we are playing a huge part into facilitating that, and that is a very optimistic experience, and I think the messaging of the libertarian ideals is also very positive and optimistic, and I think that message resonates more and more compared to like all the hatred that other really hardcore ideologies trying to promote.